All right. So
Yeah, but
I'm
good,
just
good to see you.
yeah, good to finally meet you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. I see you hosted my friend Daniel Yu at some point. How's it?
Sorry, who? I didn't hear that.
You hosted Daniel Yu, right?
Oh
Of
yeah, Soko Watch.
yeah,
It was an amazing conversation. Amazing
yeah.
conversation. He's really high energy. He had a lot of great things to say and share with our
Mhm,
community. I
mhm.
thoroughly enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah. Also, pretty smart dude, man. I've interacted with him. He's on another level. The guy can speak 6 languages, can play a piano, can play a guitar. He knows how to speak Swahili like fluently. So respect to him.
Yeah, Ed has traveled like a third of the world.
Yeah. Um, yeah. He's one of
Very,
those few friends that I have that make me question sort of like what have I done in life more frequently.
yeah, he is amazing. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. So we
Yeah.
are now live. I'm about to
Okay.
share the YouTube link here. And
Yeah.
so
Are you on YouTube or just still as ASL?
excuse me?
How you what is your is it called YouTube name or I
Yeah,
can also just
so
check.
yes, so our YouTube channel is Africa Startup Lab, and I can actually text you the link to the stream
Okay.
so you could
Okay.
share it with your audience.
Yep. I can see it's live.
Yep. All right. So we'll just now, I think that the link has been shared across all our channels, and just give it a little bit of time for people to trickle in, and we'll be able to get started in 2 to 3 minutes here.
Yeah. Okay. Let me also use that time to just make sure that my phone does not die on me. I'm using my phone and my laptop is on my table. Just a minute.
Yeah, no, take your time, please.
That's it. Sorry, guys. What time is it in Chicago right now?
It's 6:31 a.m.
Oh wow. Okay. So that's actually a lot of pressure. I better show some value on this conversation for you to wake up at 6.
I'm an early riser, usually.
Okay.
It is
Yeah.
slightly earlier than I wake up, but I am not too thrown off, so it's still fine. Totally fine.
Okay. Yeah. It's 2:30 p.m. East African time. So in the middle of our day, just some people coming out from lunch and all. But you're already like awake and conscious. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
happy.
I I I am ready to go here.
So thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you for accepting our invitation. Really, really appreciate you coming on to our speaker series. And yeah, really looking forward to delivering a valuable conversation here. We just give a few more minutes, 2 more minutes for people to join on to our live and we'll be able to get started.
Yeah, thanks. Meanwhile, I'll just go on mute as I try and reply on a couple of things, but let me know whenever you want me to be engaged.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, Maurice, I am ready whenever you are. You're still on mute.
Oh, sorry about that.
Uh,
It's the most common word nowadays. You're on mute.
yes. So thank you everybody
Yeah.
for joining us here at Let's Talk Startups in Africa, our speaker series talking with entrepreneurs and investors and innovators that are paving the way in the Africa startup ecosystem. I'm joined here by Maurice Otieno from Kenya. And before we start, just a few housekeeping items. This talk is now live on our YouTube. We will be monitoring the chat for your questions, so please jump in the chat, ask questions. Vanessa from our team here at Africa Startup Lab is monitoring our LinkedIn chat as well as our YouTube live chat. So please feel free to ask questions to Maurice as we go through this conversation. We have a few questions ready for him. Most of the interview for the first 45 minutes will be questions planned, and then we will take Q&A from the audience for the last 15 minutes. So without any further ado, welcome to you, Maurice. And thank you very much for joining us here. It is a true honor speaking with you today. And we would love to start with a brief introduction about yourself.
Thank you, Boum, for also inviting me to your space to be able to just share the little that I have known or garnered over time. So my name is Maurice Otieno, based out of Nairobi, Kenya, the capital city of Nairobi. Started off as an accountant, which became a bit boring for me at Harvard Business School. Joined the entrepreneur scene in 2014 as an investor. At that time, worked at Nest VC, which we ended up investing in about five startups in Africa, across Africa, Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. And we ran out of money of investing, and most of our money was coming from Hong Kong, which was the headquarters of Nest VC. So we quickly had to think about um, how do we still have more impact within the community? How do we still continue to champion the culture of entrepreneurship in Africa and in Kenya particularly? So we morphed into what is now currently known as Metta, Metta Nairobi. And basically what Metta is a community of entrepreneurs, investors, corporates, and anybody who's enthusiastic about entrepreneurship to be able to come together and sort of like support each other. So it's like a connecting platform, both physical and virtual. With that, I had the honor of being the team that launched it and drove it to where it is right now with over 450 members across the continent. And doing a lot of impactful work in terms of capacity building for both entrepreneurs and investors, as well as also connecting entrepreneurs to relevant resources that they might need through their growth journey. Fast forward a year ago, the reason why I paused a bit is because my brain has just rubbed off 2020. So I was trying to picture how far we are.
That's fine.
Yeah, so
We all have.
Exactly. I think it's still, for me, 2021 feels like just still an extension of 2020. So saying a year ago is like confusing a bit. I have to recalibrate my brain to figure out where we are. But yeah, so in 2019, so Meta launched in 2014, 2015. I ran and built Meta to what it is to late 2019. Then we got some funding from our media networks, about $1 million to launch a similar space, focusing mainly on media and looking at how do we build new models of media, how do we build better storytelling capabilities, mainly focusing on issues of public interest. So, because as we know, all over the world, media is very broken in terms of their business models right now, and their profitability is slowly going down. Actually, not slowly, but drastically going down. So there needs to be something that is done. So that's what we got. We were mandated to launch it and run it for 3 years, of which in early 2020, just before the pandemic hit Nairobi, I decided to jump ship and go and lead as the executive director of Baraza Media Lab, where I am currently positioned at, and sit on the advisory board of Meta. And basically what we are doing now at Baraza Media Lab is almost like an incubator for media startups, where we're trying to look at new models of storytelling. We're trying to look at new business models of how media can monetize apart from advertising. Yeah, so that's where we have tried to really compress it for the context and the time that we have. But feel free to ask any questions within my transition to where I am right now.
Yes, thank you very much for that very detailed introduction of yourself and quite an amazing journey so far. So I'd like to take us back to your starting days when you actually started investing in companies. So you had financing from Hong Kong, you mentioned. Is there any reason why the Hong Kong support did not continue supporting your investment activities, given that typically when funds raise capital, they plan for the next fund to support the current investments that they have as those investments grow? Why was that a different case for you at Nest VC?
So I think for that, I'd like to dig deep into the model of how Nest operated. So Nest operated in the sense that one, we used to run accelerator programs, or still run accelerator programs. And while running the accelerator programs, one thing that okay, let me go back. So the accelerator program is not your typical accelerator program where we run it for startups and then we invite investors. We actually run it for corporates. So we go and focus on, let's say it's fintech. We run an accelerator program for this particular bank. And in the process of doing that, we also, as the program managers of this accelerator program, we identify some cool startups that we might want to put in our money. So that's the venture side that came up. So we used to, because we've already built a relationship with these startups, we know them sort of like intimately, and it will enable us and give us the comfort of like, let's invest in them. So we wanted to replicate the similar model in Africa and in Kenya. And the reason why I'm even smiling is because this goes back to reinforce the narrative that you don't replicate what you see in other continents back on the African continent and expect it to work. Because at this point, the corporates that we are working with here, first of all, are not cross-country corporates. So if you're working with Safaricom, which is I can almost authoritatively say it's the number one teleco within the region, they first of all, innovation is still new. At that time, innovation was still very nascent. They didn't focus on that. They're just focusing on a brick and mortar business growth without innovation. So pitching to them innovation and telling them why they should pay us big bucks to run a program for them to work with startups was not key. There are also very few companies that most startups actually go to. So they ask you the question of why would we pay you to bring us startups, and yet startups are coming to us. So that kind of dismantled the business model that they had initially of working through corporate innovation as a way of investment. The other piece was that the owners of the money, for me, in my context, had a little less tolerance towards the patience that is required for growth of startups here. And that led to the cash withdrawal. So those, from my perspective, again, at that point, that's, I think, why the money did not continue. The companies that we were getting were early stage, yes, but I think they were also early in the game in terms of what they were doing. Remember, the Kenyan ecosystem, some people say it's 20, some people say it's 15 years. In terms of structure as a startup ecosystem, it's less than most countries. Some countries in Asia, like Hong Kong and let's say Europe, in UK, and the US. So one company that we dealt with, that we invested in, is called Ongair, Ongair. And what Ongair was doing was basically providing a customer service solution to big companies that are communicating with a lot of their clients at once through WhatsApp and WeChat and Messenger. So this big bank could communicate to all their clients directly via these platforms and actually have a sort of like an interpersonal communication with them, which made people feel a bit appreciated. But this was way, way early. Then came in WhatsApp for Business, which disrupted their business. So there are so many things that they were doing which were relevant but too early. And we had seen them in other markets, but they're not relevant for the market at that. So coupled with that, those are some of the things that made us now to scale back on investing on the continent at that time.
That's very interesting. Definitely the investment paradigm has to shift when you shift markets, and getting that alignment with the investors is very important to be able to support the startups. And obviously, yes, it's all about timing in a lot of cases. So yeah. I would like to then move forward to your time at Metta, where you built this startup support system and investor support system as well. So walk us a little bit through how you would recruit startups onto Metta.
So actually, the funny thing that my previous colleague and boss, actually, he's called me Aaron Fu. He's now with the Catalyst Fund, previously with Nest. So what we used to talk about was like when we are running these accelerator programs, of course, there's that criteria of how we are choosing them to join the program. So we have a very rigorous process of how to choose them. And of course, you cannot support over 100+ people who apply. we only choose like 8. But you could see like out of the 100 plus who are applying, and we choose 8, all these other ones are good. So we already had a database in mind of people that we can reach out and be like, why don't you become a member? One thing though that was very key for you to join Metta as a member was, one, if you're an entrepreneur, we were looking at, of course, is it an existing business? One, first of all, because there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs but are not really actively being entrepreneurs. We also had sort of like an onboarding process of just understanding what are your needs, because again, as you go through the growth curve of most of the startups, they need different things, and seeing if we are able to provide that need that you have. So there was that onboarding process to see the need, almost like a needs analysis that we do with the startups. So that it was a very, for us, we didn't have sort of like very hard lines in terms of like sectors that we need, age, gender. For us, it was just you're an entrepreneur and you're a true entrepreneur. So it's something that is ongoing, one, and also understanding your needs. So there are some people who we couldn't support, for example. So there are some entrepreneurs whose businesses are too grown for us to even help. But so that was the simple criteria that we had.
Yeah. So, and I see if there's anything you need to tend to, feel free to.
Sorry. Sorry about this. I'll just lock the door so that you don't hear my daughter in the background.
It's fine.
I think the interview that happened on CNN where the interviewee's daughter was passing in the background already set sort of like the standards for us. So right now.
Yeah, totally fine. So
yeah.
So I was actually going to ask you about the sectors that you focused on. So are you saying you were completely broad? Was it tech applied to any industry, or was it traditional service industries? Anything? It was, were other industries included other than tech?
So other industries were included other than tech. We actually had like a fashion designers join as members. And the reason why we were a bit broad is because if we are a connecting platform, people need diverse things during the time. The common denominator for us was entrepreneurship. You're an entrepreneur, you're in fashion, you're in tech, you're in logistics. At some point, you need somebody who helps you to think through finances. At some point, you need funding from whatever source, either it's VC, banks, or even family and friends. So for us, it was completely sector agnostic. It was not focusing on tech, but just to also go deeper into the question that you asked, there was something that was very peculiar. I think also it could also go a long way to define how Kenya is. Of course, most of the people who are accessing our space and utilizing it a lot were people within the tech business. And if you go even deeper into that, we're mostly even fintech and logistics startups. I don't know if you call them logistics technology or something, but those are the people who are utilizing our platform more. So we found we had a lot of fintech platforms. We had a lot of people within healthcare. We had a lot of what else? Yeah, but majorly those sectors were the ones who were predominant, but we are completely sector agnostic. Yeah.
Got you. And so did you see any, did you have any challenges managing a community with, where you had entrepreneurs across different sectors in terms of the value proposition that you were offering them? Or would you say that there wasn't any specific challenge? Because as you see right now from our analysis of the offerings, a lot of the incubators and accelerators in startup communities on the continent right now are really focused on specific niche, and you're starting to see a lot of specialization. So I would love to hear some lessons from, you running a program where there's a broad look in terms of the sectors and the backgrounds of the entrepreneurs that are coming in.
Yeah, and looking back in retrospect, I think we could have at least focused on particular sectors, even if it was 2 or 3, so that we could go deeper into terms of the support levels that we offer. And that's actually the other thing that I'm seeing even on the continent and in Kenya particularly. We're seeing now accelerator programs, even co-working spaces, which are going now to be sector specific, gender specific. I think it's a plus and it shows growth of the ecosystem where people are becoming now specialized within a particular sector and they can go deeper in terms of support. For us, that was one thing that really stretched our resources, because then that means what we were doing was almost delivering 25% at 25% to everyone, which, yes, to some extent you're doing a good job, but to some extent some people, it's not too fast to meet the demand. So that's the disadvantage of and the pressure that we got when we were running the space and being sector agnostic. But the advantage and the beauty about it was just seeing the unexpected connectivity that happens between different sectors. Somebody is within financial technology, the other one is in med tech. And when they meet up and they discover, like, actually, my solution could be very appropriate for you, for your growth. And actually, this is how we're handling the regulation, considering that the financial sector and the healthcare sector are the most highly regulated sectors almost all over the world. So having those sort of like very serendipitous moments where people are kind of interacting and being like, actually, let me learn from what you're doing to be able to execute it on my side without fear of competition, because again, you're in different sectors. That was also something that was a plus when we were doing the programs and when you are onboarding members within the space.
So that actually leads me to an interesting point. Do you think that Africa as a venture ecosystem is maybe specializing too soon? Because if you look at the trajectory of other ecosystems, in the US, Europe, Asia, how they grew, do you think that the specialization of the startup support system is happening a little too soon, and as a consequence is crowding out other types of entrepreneurs that are now getting much less support because maybe tech is the new sexy thing that everybody wants to go into, and now all of a sudden fashion entrepreneurs maybe are getting less support? Do you think it is too early for this, or would you, as an ecosystem builder that you are there any approaches that you could maybe suggest as to how the entire ecosystem could be moved forward without crowding out or leaving out a few entrepreneurs?
That's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question because, again, on the other hand, if you look at the advantage that Africa and Kenya has, is that we are learning from other ecosystems that are ahead of us. So we are in a position where we could leapfrog easily. You look at the US and the technology movement. You look at Europe. So we are, to some extent, yes. To some extent, there's some level of care and concern that we should have around crowding out other specific spaces. But to a larger extent, on my side, I feel very confident that we're actually learning from what other people are saying and saying, hey, if technology is what is the future and we are seeing it already with other countries, then why don't we just get there instead of waiting and going through the process? Why don't we jump that process? For example, a good example is even, I know it has been talked about a lot, let's say our M-Pesa systems. It's completely moved from where the banks in other parts of the world, especially more developed parts of the world, are still really using what I can call backward or late technologies in terms of their financial services. We are already moving on mobile, where I'm working with my bank in my hand. I want a loan, I want insurance, I want to transfer money, I want to receive money. I'm working with it in my hand, right? And actually, I don't even need the internet. I just need my phone, and that's it. So if you look at this cutting edge technology that are leapfrogging what other people are trying to achieve, for me, that's a plus. And you see the impact that it has created across the country is pretty advantageous. Look at things like Soccer Watch, who you're talking to, and just trying to look at the opportunity that is there with the broken infrastructure that we have and trying to optimize around that and just leapfrogging a couple of things through technology. So yes, I am confident that the technology focus that we have right now is the right way to move. We don't need to go through the normal process of an ecosystem development because we have already seen other parts of the world going through it and we are learning from their mistakes. I think that's how we should take it in terms of, for example, right now I'll be very concerned on anybody who's building something around social engagement in Africa. Like we've seen what Facebook can do to a society, we've seen what social media can do. So if you're building something that is almost close to that, how do we watch out so that this does not happen to us? So that's the thing. That's how I'll take that approach.
Thank you very much. So switching a little bit to the support that you were offering these entrepreneurs. Did you help these entrepreneurs access funding as part of a Metta? And beyond funding, what else would they get when they join your program?
Yeah. So coming from a background where we were initially a venture capital ourselves, that meant that we had a huge database of other venture capitalists or other investors, angels or PE funds that we had on our database that we wanted to either co-invest with or just hear about feedback from them. And on this other hand, we had all these entrepreneurs that were coming to us, either through the programs or just approaching us to be like, we need investment from you. So it was inevitable for us to play like a marketplace role where we are connecting both of them. And especially once we sort of like transition from being a VC to more of a connector and being more from providing that trust, because also how we notice that most investors investing on the continent and Kenya specifically are mostly not from here. They are mostly from, let's say, outside the continent or outside the country. So they also mostly work with a component of trust. And they trust, let's say, if Metta or Maurice introduces this entrepreneur to them, rather than if the entrepreneur reached out directly. So that role was very important for us to come in and try and help and solve for. Of course, it has its own challenges and some issues that we could have ironed out earlier on. So apart from that connection to like investors, there was another component of working with corporates. So corporates over time have become very aware of innovation, and it's because of a myriad of factors. One is because there's a lot of investments in Kenya right now, both infrastructurally and from a technology perspective from China. And that meant that the legacy traditional businesses that were here have to either pivot and look at how do they innovate, basically. So it's become more urgent for them to look for innovation. So playing that piece of connecting them also was something that the entrepreneurs will benefit from. Then there was the other piece of actually connecting entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs. So I'm starting out, I have this business. You've started your business like 4 years ago, it's thriving. What can I learn from you? For the more senior entrepreneurs, we are finding them using the platform and the space as a hiring platform, where they could come and say, hey, I'm looking for a CTO. Where can I get a very good CTO? For the corporates, of course, for finding innovation, but as well also for hiring. So they could come in and say, actually, I'm seeing that guy is a very good sales guy. Can I talk to him? So that's sort of like what the entrepreneurs are getting from capacity building, connections to corporates, investors, and other entrepreneurs, as well as a physical space of just to come in and just release your like a safe space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs do need that.
Once in a while, you need a place where you're not being asked for something. You can grab a beer or grab coffee or tea and just chat with other peers without thinking about the business for just a second. So that and we offered that. At some point, we through partners, we hosted an event called Fun, F-U-N. So like, I don't know if that's profanity on your channel, but allow me to use it, like fuck up night. And that was basically an entrepreneur coming in to say, this is how I messed up. And I'm not ashamed about it because I'm talking to other people who have really, really messed up. And that sometimes it's almost like an AA for entrepreneurs, and it worked miracles.
Yeah, definitely share your failures so that those could truly become lessons for yourself. So this seems very, very impactful and high value. And at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that you had a community of about 450 members, if I am not mistaken. So what is the acceptance rate into the community like that? Would you say there were more applications than you let in, and what does that ratio like?
So I'll answer the question, then I'll give you more context of how I was thinking about it. So one, initially, we didn't even have capacity to sustain the numbers of inquiries that we are getting, and we were a team of about 7 people. And that was because, first of all, we were offering something that was unique and new on the continent. I can authoritatively say that. I think the only closest space that was doing something similar to what we are doing is called Alpha Code. And Alpha Code is based out of South Africa, and they're focusing only on fintech startups. So they're a membership platform for only fintech startups. They are the closest organization to what Metta was offering in terms of membership and support for organizations. Now, so initially we got a lot of interest that we could sustain, and we had to almost like select and choose, and there was almost like a referral mechanism where you refer somebody that you believe should be part of the community. So the success rate was about, even like out of 10, you'll find like only 5 or 4 sometimes will go through people that we accept in the initial stages. Then I think, to give more context, over time, it became more and more easy for you to get through. And the reason being is we had, I think, overestimated the number of entrepreneurs that we were looking for within the market to suit that membership club, for sustainability's sake also. Because we thought that the market was too big. And you quickly notice that Nairobi, actually the Kenyan ecosystem, predominantly is Nairobi. Nairobi is too small. So that we had to loosen sort of like the entry point a little bit. But that's just the genesis of how the people are coming through to the market.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is because we see different dynamics across several different ecosystems in terms of, okay, we are a startup support organization. Here are the services that we're capable of offering entrepreneurs to move them along the entrepreneurial journey. And here are our criteria. And depending on on several different dynamics, it could be the criteria, or it could also be the size of the entrepreneurial community. We see different dynamics of acceptance. So I was just very curious to see how that played out at Metta.
Yeah,
I'm seeing a few questions coming in here. So what would you say was your North Star metric at Metta? What was that single metric that you aimed for?
That's actually, as somebody who was part of the founding team, I think, to be very honest with you, I was very conflicted about a lot of things. For me, it was almost like 5 things that I was like, if we achieve all these 5 things, we'll be okay.
Please share.
Exactly. So we were just like doing all these things because, one, I was very excited about like fundraising success. Like, if you come in here within 18 months, would you have gotten any successful investments into your business? From a corporate side, it was just to see how many technologies did you get within the space that you could go and deploy into your organization, and you got them within the space. From people who are coming in to just speak, to start up their ideas, it was more of like, have you started? How many people have started this thing? So I don't think we did have like one particular one that we had. We had multiple because we were dealing also with very different people within the ecosystem, from investors, corporates to startups. But the bottom line was just providing that access to everyone, because it's access to technologies that we can implement as corporate, access to investors, access to funding, access to talent. So that was almost like the common denominator that we were aiming for. And you will find that our membership and community team was always busy on just those connections, to just make sure that people are highly super connected to access the resources that they need at any point in time. Now, that brought in a challenge since we were also the first. How did we measure that? That was the challenge. Like, just measuring that, hey, are we actually moving in the right direction if access and connections are our bottom, like North Star, for example? Was it working? That was really one of my sort of like regrets, that coming out of that space was like, I cannot come out and say, actually, you know what? These are the number of successful connections. By providing the connections to various entrepreneurs, investors, and all that was done, and you could quantify it in terms of thousands of connections that we've done. But that follow-up to see, was this connection meaningful? What did it result to? We didn't have the capacity to do that. And even now, as we speak, there's a lot of conversation within the community to see how do co-working spaces, accelerator programs, membership platforms like Metta measure their impact beyond the numbers of connections, the numbers of programs, the numbers of participants. Have these participants started their business? Are their business surviving? How many of them fundraised? How many have they employed? So that level of detail is what I, to some extent, regret that we didn't have the capacity to do, which I think is the most important thing that keeps us doing what we're doing.
And I'm so glad that you actually mentioned that, because that was my follow-up question. So in terms, and that is something that we see as well, is you see the input, you see the number of startups coming in, you see the work, you see that you're making connections, and that quite a few are actually advancing in that journeys. But then you lose track, right, of how far did your work actually take them. So in terms of tracking that impact, what do you think the solution or solutions could be to allow startup support organizations actually to track their impact and track the progression of the startups beyond engaging within the programs that they put forward?
I'm happy about the questions that you're asking, because it's one of the, actually, as I said, it's one of the conversations that we as ecosystem builders, I'm in this WhatsApp group that I could literally like screenshot and show you that exactly what you've asked is what we are discussing right now. Because again, I think in my own view, it boils down to how the ecosystem builder is funding their work. How do they fund their work? Because that is what will determine if, one, they have the talent to be able to follow that, to look at the impact that they are creating. Do they have the funding? Do they have the time to be able to do that? Is that necessary for them? Because if it's being funded by somebody who does not just wants numbers, let's say I only want 20 participants. Whatever happens to the 20 participants after this program, I don't care. Then it's not important for you to do it. So for me, it boils down to how are the existing ecosystem builders being funded, or how are they funding their programs and their engagement. That will answer the question of how they could go about it. I think it's very important that impact is tracked. In terms of like, you've come from this program or you're sitting at this space, how has it changed your business, your mindset and everything? So that can communicate our importance of existence. Why are we existing as Metta? But I think most community support organizations mostly do not have the funding to do that. You find that most of the ecosystem support organizations are only supported by development agencies through projects or grant makers. And most of these people are very heavy on numbers. They want 120 participants to go through my program for the next 3 weeks. Yes, you can do that, but is it sustainable from a post-program support system? So for me, it's to change the funding structures of ecosystem builders for them to allow them to be able to focus on the impact that they are working on, especially on these startups, either 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the road. One, so change the structure of funding them. The second piece is most ecosystem builders have really focused on community managers as the key sort of like employees that they have within the space, because you want to maintain that relationship with either your startups who are going through your program or people who are sitting within your space. I think also they need to focus on another component, which is monitoring and evaluation talent, just to collect that data on a daily basis and see how does it change the community and change how does it impact the work that most people are doing. So those are the two things that I would propose for most as a solution going forward.
Thank you very much. And every time you talk, I feel like you're taking the thoughts out of my mind and just kind of mentioning them. It's so amazing because essentially we're totally aligned here, because I was going to ask you about the collection efforts, and you just mentioned it, like essentially you feel like community managers beyond just engaging should probably also spend more time on data collection and tracking. So thank you very much for that. So I definitely want to cover your transition over to Baraza Lab, but before we do that, I would love to just, where do you see, maybe any predictions around, startup support organizations, where do they go from now? How has maybe COVID kind of changed the trajectory? Just some trends around where you see startup support for the venture ecosystem in Africa going.
So when you ask me that, I think of how we operate Baraza and how I operated Metta and how some of my friends are operating their spaces. So we are these spaces that predominantly support tech-enabled businesses across the continent. Most of the people who sit within the co-working spaces or go through accelerator programs are mostly tech-enabled businesses. But also we are some of the businesses that are completely tech averse. Like we don't utilize technology within our operations or our service delivery. The much we do is Slack and WhatsApp groups and Google Drive. I'm seeing a situation where more virtual communities are going to make sense. There's one that so during my time at Metta, we tried to do that, but I think it was too early for that time. And I wish the management at that time would have seen the sense of what we were trying to build. There was something called Metta Connect, which was basically, I know there's Facebook, there's all these other groups, but there's something about having a trusted platform where everybody within that space, you trust them because you have the same sort of like DNA, right? You want to achieve success as entrepreneurs. So we had this member management platform that we converted into almost like a connection and chatbot that people could chat amongst each other. We had things like ask and offers. So I could ask for like, hey, I want to buy headphones. You could say I'm selling headphones, and almost like a marketplace. There's also some component of curated introductions within that space. So mostly from investors to startups. And almost like a curated way of connecting service providers to investors. So for example, I'm an investor in the US. I want to do due diligence in a startup in Kenya. Who can I connect? Who can do it on my behalf instead of me flying all the way down there? And in retrospect, when I look at what we were building and I look at COVID right now, it would have been the perfect solution for most of our members. But we didn't go further with it because at that time, it is not a priority. Our priority is to onboard more members, sign them up, take them to a program. Of course, there's the pressures of making revenue. So we didn't focus on that. And I see that as a priority that most ecosystem builders need to look at. How do we transition most of our things to a virtual way of doing it? It doesn't have to be as elaborate as the platform that I just spoke about, but it could be something that, how do we move people to using our virtual resources that we have to go to deliver that. So that's how I see most community spaces going about. We used to focus a lot on events as Metta, but also the community here, like in Nairobi alone, or in Nairobi alone, we used to have almost 7 to 10 events. Like, I'm not talking just about events, meetings. I'm talking like very good, well curated events that are focused on startups in a day. and it's happening across the town. And Nairobi is not as big as Chicago or New York, but it's crazy. It was events, 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 and they were very impactful in terms of just learning, connections, and all. But that has been disrupted. So, and there are so many support organizations that were focusing on that, including Meta. So just transitioning to be like, how do I still enforce connectivity to go to better the community, but in a safe and virtual way? So I see that becoming something that is very, very useful and impactful going forward for ecosystem builders.
Yeah, thank you. And from what you said, something that I take away is, and for most organizations, is typically the struggle is aligning short-term objectives with long-term objectives. Just like the funders of the ecosystem of the startup support organizations have shorter term objectives than the longer term objectives that startup support organizations have. And even within the startup support organizations, what do they want to do right now versus what could be tomorrow, and how do you balance that? So I definitely take that away from what you just said. So shifting now to your journey at Baraza Lab, and now it's a focused support group. It's focused on media, which I think is a very interesting pick, because I'm seeing a lot of things happening around the content creation economy, and I definitely want to hear about why media in the first place, and then how do you support media-led startups or media-focused startups?
Okay, yeah. One, from a personal note, I always loved storytelling. I still, I'm a sucker for good storytelling and movies and podcasts and everything. And I think storytelling is a very powerful tool that would use to change the world in one way or another. For presidents, one of my favorite storytellers is, of course, Barack Obama, like how he articulates, how he says things, how he presents himself. Movies, you see what they change in the world and how they even change people's perspective about places. And that has been something that Africa as a continent, and Kenya particularly, also has been good at. We're good at telling our stories through our music, through our movies, through our clothing, through, I don't know, the running and everything that we do, right? And we tell our stories and express ourselves. But the challenge is that we have lack of distribution. We have lack of innovations around that storytelling capabilities. And that kind of leaves people to tell our stories. And it leads people to tell stories that we should be the front, right, and center of. So for me, it comes from that point. So that's my personal view about why media and why Baraza. But going back to how Baraza was founded, it came up from a research that was done by our anchor funders. Now they are called Luminate, which is almost like it's like a spin-off of Omedia networks. So back then there were media networks. They did a research on Kenyan media, and when they talk about media, it's not only journalists, news anchors, and everything. They're talking about, as you said, content creators, right? YouTubers, podcasters, bloggers. And when they did a whole ecosystem mapping of that, they found that in the mainstream media, at least, the entire media ecosystem of Kenya was owned by 6 families. And these 6 families were highly and politically connected. So that meant they could shape the narrative of whatever the common citizens are consuming, and they could shape almost the future of a whole nation. And there was almost like a state capture on freedom of speech and anybody who's offering an alternative voice for the common citizens to consume and see the reality. So that meant there's a gap in terms of independent media who are of public interest, telling the normal stories that we see, because right now we are just bombarded with a lot of politics, but they are not saying about you and I, how are we not getting home because there's crazy traffic in Nairobi. So that was one reason. The other reason was also the lack of the diminishing revenues that the media industry was facing in Kenya and even globally, because of only focusing on advertising, losing audience because of their content is not aligned with their audience. So all these problems necessitated them to fund us to start this. And for them, they believe that with proper business models of media being covered and better and interesting storytelling capabilities coming out of there, it leads to an engaged citizen. An engaged citizen, of course, leads to proper governance and holding power to account, which then leads to a better society. So that's how they looked at it from a very high level. From a very rudimentary and my own view of how to look at it was storytelling is king, and we need to just power it and champion storytelling.
So it's been about a year now, or maybe a little bit over a year that you joined Baraza. So tell me about the maybe interesting stories or interesting models, or maybe an interesting startup that you've been working with, and where what really fascinates you about the new models or the new startups that you're seeing ever since you've joined.
Yeah. So again, it's been 1 year of COVID and the craziness. We literally, I think my first order of business as the executive director was on March 12th. Came into the office in the morning, and in the evening, there was a presser with the president announcing that they're locking down the country and everybody should go home. So you can imagine your first day is to tell everybody, like, go work from home. Let's see how this thing goes. And for us, we are very hopeful that it will be only 2 months and we come back. So we're already like in preparation mode. So in our first year of launching, which was 2020, the first thing that we did, our game was thrown off. Like the first thing that we had was like, oh, let's launch our incubator. Let's start a call out. We couldn't. So we threw out that strategy and said, like, how do we actually resuscitate the ecosystem? And how we did that was, first of all, launched like a mini granting program, which was granting these media houses, people who had stories of COVID impact on common people to better storytell. So we gave them like mini loans of just 250, not loans actually, mini grants of like $250 for them to be able to operate. That was the first thing. Very cool ideas that came out of there was this animator who could be able to draw cartoons showing how a common vendor was being affected by COVID through animation, which was something that we didn't sort of like foresee. Then there was this other piece that there was a photographer who was using his piece compared to the working with the animator to showcase how also common people, the supply chain actually of moving products from one corner to the other is being impacted and unaffected. So that was very sort of like not super cool, like, wow, this is very interesting, but it was just the first bit for us to just see the potential of what we could do. Now we are launching our incubator in June, June. And we already have one person that we are trying out with, and he's looking at how do writers, his platform, which is a tech-enabled platform, is looking at how do writers and editors monetize through their work. So for the first time in Kenya, we are seeing mainstream media going digital, and actually putting a paywall for you to pay for the articles that you're getting. This has never happened here. As much as New York Times are way ahead, Washington Post and everybody are like subscribers and you pay for subscription. Here it was just free digital content. The only way for you to get it is to buy a newspaper. Now newspaper has become obsolete. Guys are going digital and they want you to pay for that content. So this was the first time we are seeing that, which is something we've seen for ages in other continents. So what happened is this guy saw that move and he's also moving that side. But the challenge is that when he's democratizing who gets paid, because initially the editors are usually in the background. The writer one who actually gets a lot of credit and all that for the piece that they've done, but there's somebody behind who has done this work. So his platform allows you to not only pay per article, but it goes deeper and says you pay per word. Because sometimes you read that New York Times article, you don't finish it, but you've paid for it. But he's going back to say, if you don't finish it, you don't pay it. You don't pay for it. So he's going to, I don't know how he's using his technology to just make sure that he almost kind of estimates the level where you've gotten to, and you'll pay for the exact words that you've read. And that money will be split in the back end between the editor and the writer. So everybody gets a piece sent to the platform. So I'm really excited about this platform. almost close to what Patreon is. We have your patrons who are paying for your articles, but this is just sort of like democratized to everyone. So I'm really excited about that. The other piece that we launched was we have a lot of studios, recording studios like music studios and film studios and all, but we've never had a podcasting specific studio. So in partnership with another studio, which was doing live performances. So it's a live performance that is recorded and shared via YouTube. Like you can imagine if Jay-Z was performing and is performing live on stage, then it's broadcasted. There's no audience where he's performing, it's broadcasted live on YouTube and other channels, but you pay for that service. So we partnered with him to launch an on-demand podcasting studio where you just walk in, record your podcast, and in under 48 hours, you get your final version of podcast ready to share. He's in the process of building a platform for distribution. And I know most people would ask the question, like, why would you build a platform when there's Spotify, there's Apple just announced some upgrades on theirs. But the challenge is that when you are on the continent as a content distributor, you notice the gaps that are there. So for example, one rule or one thing that I've heard that YouTube has is that for you to really monetize via YouTube, you have to have 1 million native viewers in your content, in your country of origin. If you look at Kenya, for me that policy, it's okay, yes, but it's almost like a short. It's almost like being shot in the knee, because the thing is, we have infrastructural problems already, internet, tech, phones. So for you to ask for me to have 1 million views or viewers for me to monetize, it becomes a bit difficult. For me, I think one way of democratizing that is contextualize it based on the country's capabilities or infrastructures that enable them to monetize. But that's their business. I can't force them to do business that in a way that benefits us. So this guy is building a platform that basically allows all podcasters to monetize on their content from the onset. You join in today as Maurice. You distribute this podcast through this platform. If you have one viewer, you'll be paid based on that. But what you have to agree on is that your podcast, there'll be inserts of advertising from people who pay the company to advertise on their platform. Of course, you have the first right of refusal of who advertises and doesn't advertise on your platform, but you are only paid based on listeners, which is the data that you have and you do also have. So that was also revolutionary for me in terms of like, if you look at how podcasters or YouTubers or other alternative content creators monetize, it's really difficult because you have to amass a lot of followers and readership for you to start either earning money from the platforms, one, or earning money for advertising. But here we're saying, how can you earn even from your one viewer? So it's up to you to push to get more earners. So those are some of the sort of like interesting things that I'm seeing within this space. It's still very early. I don't know how much our capability is to be able to just build that community bigger and better.
Yeah. At the beginning of your answer, you mentioned the date March 12th, and I was laughing or smiling because that definitely brought back a lot of memories to me. I think for a lot of people across the world, I think the declaration of the pandemic was like a turn moment. And for me, like at the time I was running a travel lodging business, and definitely quite a day, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I know exactly what you walked into, because you know, I think everybody was definitely shocked through that day.
Yeah.
So
I remember it's funny. It's funny about just 2 minutes. It's not related to the conversation, but I remember actually early January, from January 9th to about February, actually like a month. I was in the US. I was in Middlebury, Monterey, and and the funny thing is that so I was going through this impact investment course that was really awesome. And one of my friends who works for trading company kept on monitoring his phone and seeing the way markets are behaving. And he's monitoring also the news in Wuhan, China. And he kept on telling me, like, Maurice, this thing is going to be serious. Coronavirus, there's this thing called coronavirus. And that was January. Like in the US, nobody even knew about coronavirus that much. in Africa, it was not even a thing. In China, yes, it was, but it was not disclosed. So for him to just keep on mentioning this thing, and I was like, I don't think there's anything that will happen. There's been a lot of outbreaks like this. Yeah, I come from Kenya, and Congo is next. They have Ebola outbreaks every single time, so this is nothing. Yeah, and we are. So looking back, he called me a few months ago and he was like, "I told you. You see what has happened? Just taking the one." So it's just as that I just remember because it's always I have set that time, that period of January to March with him, just warning me and me being very oblivious, like, no, there's nothing that is going to happen. Yeah, so I feel you.
Definitely, I think one of the early lessons is, you especially as a business leader, because personally, this conversation is getting kind of personal, but y'all bear with us here. So personally, as a business leader, that was my first, real crisis. It's like leading a business to crisis. And, at the time I was really just focused on growing the business I was running. And like a lot of founders or entrepreneurs, you're focused on this thing and you're not really looking at, outside. You don't have a, kind of like periscopic view, like looking, like sweeping what's happening outside of like what you're doing. And I think I could have done that slightly more. And I follow the news, I follow trends. I always stay abreast of what's happening, but I did not see that coming. And I mean, it's hard to say you could have, but I feel like if you were plugged into, the right channels and kind of just kept your antennas, awake, you would have seen that slightly coming in February. And there are some businesses that took the necessary steps to brace for that impact, even if they had not planned that it would be as seismic as it was. They still kind of took some preventive measures so that when it hit, they were better prepared. So even though it took the majority of the world by storm, I think there's a lesson there for entrepreneurs is always keep your, you don't know what will impact your business. So just stay abreast, stay aware.
It's very interesting you mentioned that leader in crisis. To some extent, I've considered myself that much, and I'll tell you why. So remember, I joined Nest VC, right? Before that, I was working at a business school where I was managing an MBA program, Strathmore Business School, and also my alma mater where I went. So coming from academia, cushy job, very steady salary, to a venture capital company where I was like, okay, now I've made it. I'm smack in the middle of money. Then 6 months down the road, we are told like, we're out of money. So we're out of money 6 months. I've left my cushy job. Then what happens is we are told, okay, let's figure out what we can build now. And we need to do it in the next 1 year, 1.5, or else we find our way home, right? So we build Metta. And immediately I build Metta. The person who brought me into this business, my friend, Aaron, who lives, actually he lived like 3 or 4 months after we started building it. So he was my boss. Now I'm the guy who's leading it. And it's barely a year into this business. And now I have to lead it and lead it to where it is now. So that was the first crisis that I saw in terms of this trusted person that you're looking up to in terms of what he's building, leaving you to lead whatever this, and you don't have that clarity of vision, but you have to find it so fast and build a team that also trusts in your vision within that period. Now then, fast forward to 2019 January. That's about 4 years into this. The space where we were at, the building where we are, gets attacked by terrorists. That's 14 Riverside. And actually, we do end up losing one of our colleagues and friend called Jason. And at this point, the business has been doing well and shaky a little bit. And 2018 was a very particular year towards the end because we had gotten a lot of like attention and traction in terms of business. So 2019 was very hopeful. Then January 15th, 7 days before my birthday, the terror attack happened. And we had to close down because, again, you cannot force people to work. You cannot force people to come to your space. So it's both mental, financial impact that is coming through. And you have a team and over 300 plus members that you have to contain. So that's the second crisis that I go through, and I had to take the team through that. So be strong yourself. You're suffering a loss of a friend, loss of business. You are horrified because you walk into because terrorism is different. It's different from like straight up somebody shooting you, right? That one, like I'm dead, like I'm been shot, I'm dead. This one, that somebody is looking to shoot you. So you know already that somebody is looking for me. That's the difference. It's not a surprise. So we are recovering mentally. The team recovers. Towards the end, some good news. We get $1 million investments from media. That's around September. So we're like, yeah, we've bounced back. Then in January 2020, Corona happens, and I'm still so. And you have to go through that whole process. So that's the third crisis that happens. But when it happens already, mentally, I'm already checked out. Like I'm done, and that's why actually I had to have this change of moving from Metta to Baraza. For me, it was a new beginning mentally, financially. Yeah. So as we talk about leadership in crisis, I was just looking back and just seeing that process, and it's crazy, and I can empathize with you when you talk about you have to think and you have to keep your ears on the ground. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you find that. So the lessons for me, it was all about speed of execution, and you can't have a 1 week plan and crisis. This is too far. It's like a day by day plan, and you keep shifting. You keep, and what works, you keep doing that. What doesn't work, you discard it the day later. So that was really how I navigated it, and I really like your stories about all of that. And I'm really sorry about the loss of your friend in
No,
2020.
it's okay. We've recovered, but I really I if there's anything to take out of the discussion that we have with you today for anyone listening, is what you've just said. Like it's almost like a day's plan. 1 week is too long. Some of these things that you're talking about are completely beyond your control, and you still have. And the toughest thing is that you have people who are looking up to you to solve this. Uh, you are there. You're human like them. You have blood flowing through your veins like them, but they're like, yeah, we know you've lost somebody, but I need food on my table. So how are you sorting it out? And also, actually, I'm also mentally not ready. So how are you also solving this? So I can empathize with the leaders who have gone through that process. Yeah, so I do understand.
Tough conversations, man. Tough conversations.
Yeah.
Oh man, a lot of memories. I probably should stop here, and because like this is actually taking me back to a very tough time. And thank you very much for sharing. And actually, thank you very much for staying over here. Just parting thoughts. Okay, now you are working in the media space. It is, I think, a space that, especially around content creation, where I believe there is a lot of opportunity. We're starting to see a lot of trends playing out here in the US and in other early parts of the world. I think that there is a lot of opportunity for media startups or startups that revolve around media and content creation to really copy some of these models and apply them to and customize them to our African context. But I'd like to hear from you. You're passionate about storytelling. You've been now running a media community platform for about a year now. Where do you see the future going forward, especially for media in Africa?
Yeah, right now it's very interesting to see sort of like the way the media outlets are trying to converge sort of like their content consumption into like digital and just trying to create space for alternative and experimental storytelling methods. I know there's been a lot of investigative pieces way before this time. I know there's been a lot of data storytelling that has been used within the spaces. So we're seeing almost like um, also the way the world is becoming sort of like interconnected. For example, something is happening in Uganda. Kenyans are the ones who are like push it further because they can see, they know what is happening. And also just so I'm seeing almost like a media outlet that is covering like the entire continent per se as a dream, right? and covering it in a way that it's owned and developed by the continent itself. I see a lot of opportunities, as you said, in terms of monetizing within content creation. The only risk that I see is from a government perspective, censorship with the various internet shutdowns. I know somewhere in the US that's like foreign and far-fetched, but it does happen. Uganda just shut down theirs, Tanzania at some point did. So I see a lot of government overreach with that. But I also see an opportunity of monetizing for people who are better storytellers and don't have to go to school to be journalists or photographers, but have good content. The other risk that I'm seeing is just moderation of content that is more healing and more beneficial to society. Because with that space where you've democratized access and content delivery through platforms that we have like YouTube and Zoom that we're using here, it's very difficult also to monitor what type of content we are consuming that is beneficial to our society. As a society, there are some things that might be legal, but are completely not aligned to sort of like development of the society. So that is the only risk that I see with content creation across Africa. But I've seen the power of what content creation can do to hold power to account, to highlight some societal challenges. And I think also democratizing that locals are the ones who are telling their stories from their own context. So I think it's more of just encouragement and sounding a warning alarm for in terms of watching out for censorship. Yeah.
Thank you. So as parting maybe words or thoughts, what word of advice would you have for entrepreneurs, for having been in the startup support ecosystem building arena for such a long time now, be it media entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs at large, any piece of advice that you would like to leave them with?
I'll give my advice from a context of somebody who has been supporting entrepreneurs a lot. Started a whole travel company that I don't want to say failed. I learned from it. But what I'd like to just say is we are talking of this current period. We are in a trying time where your bravery is much needed. Bravery to take up the challenge of solving for a problem that is ailing in our society. And I think as entrepreneurs look for support, especially in ecosystem support organizations like ourselves, also the patience to understand that we are also entrepreneurs ourselves. So we're trying to solve entrepreneurs' challenges, and you might not be right 100%, but we rely on your feedback. You're asking for solutions. So it's almost like the advice I'm giving is almost like ask for aid, ask for whoever can help. And you never know what might be out there for your as a solution. You're not alone. It's just the community around you is there, and it's just the ecosystem are an amalgamation of solutions that you need. So reach out, ask in whatever capacity you are as an entrepreneur, early stage, late stage. There's always something you're needing. Yeah, it's talent, investments, or even just chat. So for me, it's just ask a lot of questions. Solutions, answers are definitely there.
Thank you very much, Maurice, for taking the time. You've heard it. Be curious, go out there and ask, and the solutions are out there to help you support and move forward in your journey. Thank you very much, Maurice. Such a pleasure having you on Let's Talk Startups in Africa. Such a great conversation, and I definitely look forward to staying in touch. Thank you very much, Maurice.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your time too.
Thank you. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.